Darkness is not an affirmative force. It simply reoccupies the space vacated by the light.
This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
It should be uncomfortable for a believer to live as a hypocrite.
Delivering people out of the bondage of mainstream media and the philosophies of this world.
God has called you and me to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment. Let's not miss our moment.
And now, the Hamilton Corner.
Welcome to the program. Alex McFarland here sitting in. You're listening to the American Family Radio Network, and this is the Hamilton Corner, normally hosted by attorney, pastor, and cultural commentator Abe Hamilton III. I have the great honor of frequently sitting in when he's on the road traveling, and I welcome you. It's a great honor to be with you. You know, we have got a great show today. We have Cheryl Chumley, who's the author of several books that I really want you to be aware of, and we'll meet Cheryl in just a moment. If you recognize my voice, it's probably because of the AFR show Exploring the Word that is now in its 14th year and growing all the time, and give God the glory for the opportunity to be with you today. You know, we're in the middle of December getting ready to celebrate Christmas, the birth of Jesus Christ. And the world for nearly 2,000 years has acknowledged the birth of Jesus Christ. And what's so interesting is our nation, the United States of America, is a nation founded on biblical principles. I've had the privilege of speaking on more than 200 American college campuses, and I'm always shocked at the number of people, not only students, but professors, that seem, if they are aware of America's biblical DNA, they argue against it. But most people, and I'm talking about in academics, seem to be unaware of the biblical Judeo-Christian foundations of our country. John Quincy Adams, our 6th U.S. president, said this, quote, "The highest glory of the American Revolution was this. It connected in one indissoluble bond the principles of civil government and the principles of Christianity." Well, I believe our guest, Cheryl Chumley, agrees that people need to know these things. Cheryl is the online opinion editor and host of Bold and Blunt, the podcast for the Washington Times. She's a best-selling author and a frequent media guest on national television and radio. She's a prolific author and a voice that needs to be heard. Now, her book titles are amazing. One of her recent books was titled Socialists Don't Sleep. Christians Must Rise or America Will Fall. And that's a great book. I also want to talk to her about her newest book, Lockdown. She is gracious with her time, and we're very honored to have her on. Welcome, Cheryl Chumley.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's my honor to be with you. Thank you.
Well, let me urge people to go online and check out her books, the book Lockdown, The Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. Cheryl, in addition to incredible content, I have to commend you. Your book covers are awesome. You have really great book covers. But the best part of all, of course, the content.
Yeah, kudos to the publisher on the book cover choices. I agree. They did a tremendous job.
Well, you know, I'm always interested in people's, story. What brought you to this journey of, issuing the clarion call of truth and freedom? How did you become Cheryl Chumley?
Well, that's a broad question. So let me just be as succinct as possible. I was an atheist. Even at this point, even at this age in life, for the majority of my life. But I always cherished freedom and individualism. And when I became a Christian, I saw immediately the link, the inextricable tie between Christianity or Judeo-Christian principles and constitutionally protected freedoms in this country, that you can't separate the two. And everything that I write about is from that basic theme, Christian conservative perspective. And if you look at all that is problematic in America right now, it goes back to the one point that we have turned from God. So when you ask how I became what I am today. It's because of my faith in God. That's where I started to become more discerning about what was taking place on the political realm.
Powerful. When I hear that, and it's been my privilege to interview some just stellar intellects. Marvin Olasky of World Magazine, who did his PhD at Harvard, and Jay Budziszewski at the University of Texas at Austin, Political Science Department. Both of those guys were atheists, but they, like yourself, they cared about freedom and liberty. And the bottom line, they, each of them, apart from each other, but they realized there was this universal moral knowledge. Blackstone, the English lawyer in the 18th century, William Blackstone, talked about the natural law written on every human heart. And in the case of Marvin Olasky and Jay Budziszewski, and this was the trajectory of C.S. Lewis as well, it was this, first of all, they realized there are morals, and there must be an objective basis for moral and ethical truth, and that basis is God. And if we don't keep God in the conversation about government, it becomes kind of a might makes right ethic. So it wasn't that guys like that were initially looking for salvation or Jesus, but they were trying to figure out how to preserve our liberties. And basically the elephant in the room was Christianity. And they became Christians, so did you. But don't you think it's important that we have this conversation so at the very least people will understand that government and laws don't just come about in a vacuum, do they?
I think it's the only conversation that matters, to be honest. If we don't have this conversation, everything else becomes subjected to the whims and wills of the population at that moment, right, at that time. And I'm not as scholarly as the two gentlemen you named, and probably not as scholarly as you, but I am common sense. And if you look at what founding fathers gave us in terms of a democratic republic, right, a limited form of government that was based on law and order, then they warned us the only way you could maintain a limited form of government was if the people were moral and virtuous, right? And so those morals and virtues have to be fixed. They can't be floating in the wind. They can't be subject to the breezes of humanity, however they may blow. And so it becomes a common sense principle to discuss. And it is the basis of all that is great about America and really all that America stands for. The idea of individual rights and liberties coming from God. And if you recognize that and you cherish that, you want to preserve and protect that. And the only common sense way to do that is to keep God at the forefront in society.
Cheryl, as a citizen, and I can tell you're an extremely well-informed citizen, what worries you about the current state of America? I could say concerned. I'm going to be honest, my own heart worried a little bit. What are you concerned about for the state and possible future of the United States of America?
The growing secularism. The rise of nuns, the empty churches, the sounding clanging gong that went off in my head when under the 3 years of the coronavirus, churches closed at government dictate because they said they wanted to do the right thing, they wanted to protect their congregations and so forth. But in a nation that was founded on a quest primarily of religious freedom, and that is grounded on the idea of God-given individualism. If you see churches closed based at government dictate, government order, no matter what the reason is, if churches close because a bureaucrat tells them they have to close, that is a 12-hour, moment in that nation's history. And that's what concerns me the most about America. We could fight any evil to come as long as we have people who have a faith in above, and that's what we're losing.
Yeah, and it was shocking to me just how compliant churches were, just to I'm going to say kind of roll over and play dead. At like you said, the government dictate. That's just not the timber that we were built from, was it?
No, and they say the path to hell is paved with good intentions, right? And I saw a lot of that at play with many of the religious leaders who closed their churches, closed their places of worship based on concerns for their flock, desiring to keep them healthy and safe and so forth from a virus, or at least that was their stated reason. And I would ask, is that their jobs, right? It's a little bit of skewing here, and this is where the devil has such great success, right? It's 99% truth, 1% lie. The job of a pastor, for instance, is not to save a member of his or her flock from a virus. It's to preach the word, first and foremost. And so when I saw the government able to shut down churches, and a lot of these religious leaders did so obediently and willingly, thinking that they were doing a service for their congregations, that is a little bit alarming to see such evil painted as good.
Yeah, exactly. And do you know what? Listen, I had 38 conferences on the books for 2020. A few in arenas, but most in churches. And within probably in under the space of 10 days, 38 events got canceled. And I had literally dozens of American pastors say to me, well, but what if, Alex, what if we open the church and somebody gets coronavirus? And I said, well, I mean, our job is to preach the word. Whether or not they choose to get in the car and come to the event or stay home, that's their choice. But it really was dying the death of a lot of hypothetical, what if. And I don't know, my heroes that have shaped history, like Churchill, by the way, just days ago was the birthday of Winston Churchill. They didn't live their life in fear and what if. They did the right thing and trusted God for the results. I mean, don't you think we need that kind of courage and conviction again?
I do. And, you describe what if. That is the spirit of fear, right? And what's the opposite of faith but fear? So you can't say that you're living and walking on God's path if you're constantly reacting and acting in fear, right? The two don't go hand in hand. You're either living in faith or you're living in fear. And under the coronavirus, I saw fear dominate the atmosphere in America and around the world for that matter. And it was fear that just drove from rational people's minds the ability to think common sense, to think analytically, and to think with clear eyes at what was taking place. There were so many signs of deceptions and lies and just outright exploitation of fears that the left used, the globalists used, and many in government used to justify shutting down economies and shutting down societies. It's shocking to me that America let it go so far, but the blame is on those who refuse to stand strong for biblical principles, right? Because a nation that knows that it's God as the provider and leader is not afraid to take on government, right? You're not afraid to stand tall for principle when you are rooted in something higher than what's on this earth.
We've got a brief break. Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking with Cheryl Chumley. She's a prolific author and a voice that you need to hear. Cheryl, I know all of your books online have 4.5 to 5-star reviews. Kudos. Where can people find you online? We'll come back after the break, but website, and where would you like people to go to buy your books?
CherylChumley.com or Cheryl Chumley Substack. Thank you.
Yes. CHUMLEY, CherylChumley.com. And she's the author of Lockdown, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom, Socialists Don't Sleep, Police State, The Devil in D.C. More with author, commentator Cheryl Chumley when we return. Stay tuned, folks.
What temptations fight for the throne of your heart? Money, relationships, food, security? If any of these things are the source of your daily motivation, you may feel drained and spiritually exhausted. Maybe this is all you know. Maybe fighting for control is your normal. It doesn't have to be. Try asking God what it means to rest in Jesus. Spend time thinking about Him. Jesus, God in the flesh, desires relationship with us so much so that He died on a cross to take the punishment that we deserved. There is rest in Jesus, and that rest comes from seeing how much Jesus loves His people and responding to His love with everything we are given. So go, ask Jesus to help your unbelief. Look to God through Scripture, then look to God through His faithful followers, and experience the rest of worshiping God with all your heart.
This has been an encouraging word from American Family Radio.
Snickers is running an unnecessarily vulgar commercial that makes light of sin and swinging. The commercial features two couples playing a board game where a misunderstanding leads to one person expressing interest in wife swapping. It's poor taste to make light of such an indecent topic, especially when aired on family-friendly television. Join us at 1 Million Moms to get Snickers to stop its inappropriate marketing campaigns. Sign the petition at 1millionmoms.com. That's 1millionmoms.com.
Romans 12 says, "Do not be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good."
Ministry is holy, it's an honor, and it's hard. We don't all have to be best friends, but I will never understand or get behind wives and mothers in ministry tearing down another woman. Why do we make her wins about our losses? If you're gossiping today, go ask for forgiveness. If you're wounded, do good and let God handle the rest.
Read the rest of Mean Girls in Ministry by Lauren Bragg at thestand.net.
Shining light into the darkness, this is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the program. Such an honor. You know, one of the great privileges of doing what we do and being on the radio and covering news is that we meet so many interesting people, and one of whom is Cheryl K. Chumley. She's the author of Lockdown. One of her books, now listen to this subtitle, Police State USA, How Orwell's Nightmare is Becoming Our Reality. But she's written a lot. She's a broadcaster, an author, a voice for God and country. Cheryl, thank you for being with us.
No, thanks for having me. It's so great to be with you.
Indeed. Let's talk a little bit about Lockdown, which that is your most recent release, right?
It is, yes. And I wrote it amid the coronavirus crazy while we were all locked down. I was one of the Americans who saw early on how the left was using the coronavirus to justify seizing individual liberties. And I wrote quite a bit at the Washington Times about the dangers of this, and then I finally decided I need to write a whole book about it. So Lockdown is a historical look back at what took place, starting with Donald Trump in the White House, but more importantly, it's a look ahead where the globalists, where the leftists, where even some in the Republican Party, let's be honest here, some of the Republicans out there aren't exactly conservatives and pro-America. They're more on board with China and their own corporate interests nowadays. But where this group of people is leading from the coronavirus to justify more lockdowns in the future. And it's a little bit frightening if you know some of your Orwell books or Ayn Rand or any of these books that talk about how easy it is really when you have fear as a tool to control, how easy it is to steal away people's liberties.
So let me ask you to get out your crystal ball. Do you foresee in 2024, on the eve of the next presidential election, do you see a quote-unquote crisis that will suddenly come upon us that I think would disrupt a fair election next year?
Well, I actually don't think it's sudden. I think it's starting right now, and we need to be aware of it. If you look at what's taking place in China right now, with the news coming out of China about the respiratory illness that is impacting children and elderly, right? The most vulnerable populations, especially the children, the one that gets all the people going, oh, no, we have to save the children. We'll do anything to save one child. And you look at how some in America are pointing to China now and suggesting that we need to take precautions, that we may have to take precautions similar to what we did during the coronavirus. You can see the slow creep starting. And if you look at how the coronavirus clampdowns occurred, it was the exact same way, right? It came out of China. There was a panic. It wove through America. There were some deniers, but ultimately we threw Bill Gates out there on the media and Anthony Fauci generating more fear, and the media did not do its due diligence to give us the proper facts about the virus, and then fear took over. So I see in my Northern Virginia community too many people walking about even now wearing face masks as they drive down the road in their cars by themselves or walk down the street by themselves, right? So it's still there. The fear is still there to use.
Well, and, you know, in my home state of North Carolina, when the mask mandate was removed, finally, it was, I don't know, a month after the mask mandate was removed, and I was in a grocery store, and everybody had a mask on. I didn't. And the cashier began to just reprimand me for not having a mask on. And 2 or 3 people in line were nodding in agreement, like, you bad, bad person. Well, I said, well, hey, the mask mandate has been removed. The law is off. You know, and the guy behind the register said to me, well, you should care enough about people to wear one anyway. And listen, I've just got enough of a rebel in me that but I just couldn't believe how people were really kind of bludgeoned into submission.
What you just described is the real danger that came out of the coronavirus. Before the coronavirus, right, in America, if you felt sick, you stayed home. If your child felt sick, you kept your child home. It was your choice. If you felt sick, maybe you went to the doctor to get a test to find out what your sickness was. And you took it on yourself because you cared for yourself and your family. And yes, maybe you cared for other people too, but you did it because you felt sick. Then came the coronavirus. You had scores of healthy-feeling Americans running to get tested to find out if they were sick, right? Even though they didn't feel sick. And they did that because they were told that was the patriotic, even Christian thing to do. And so if after 3 years of behaving as if it's our job as individuals to take care of the health and help fears of others, we have shifted from a mindset in this country of individualism, of taking care of self and family, to one more of collectivism, where we feel it's our responsibility to take care of other people's health, even if taking care of other people's health means taking care of other people's fears that they may get sick. That's a dangerous mindset shift. It's one from individualism to collectivism, which is basically what communism, socialism is all about.
Right. Well, oh my goodness, so many topics that we need to talk about and unpack. Let me ask you this. What is your call to action? To people listening and it resonates with them and they're like, yes, I'm concerned. What would your call to action be, Cheryl?
Well, I have a few ideas. First off, we have to recognize early on, right, when this trend, excuse my dog, when this trend of fear is starting up. So to me, the face masks are the outward show of willingness to comply with government orders, right? So if you don't believe in the power of the face mask, do not wear the face mask. There aren't laws that say you have to wear a face mask. There never were. I think there was one small community in Massachusetts that actually passed a law saying you had to wear them. But by and large, all those signs on the store windows that said face masks required as a condition of entry, it's the law. It's not the law. It never was the law. It was a local government health bureaucrat telling these local businesses that you must post these signs on your windows or we're going to fine you. But there was no law, and they couldn't go to court to collect the fines because there was no law broken. So my advice right now for people concerned about the direction of America and American freedoms is to stop the madness before it becomes a runaway train. Don't wear the face mask unless you truly believe in the face mask. And the second thing, my second call to action is, where are the attorneys? I'm not a litigious person, but right now we need attorneys just suing the heck out of businesses that forced employees to choose between getting a vaccine that they did not want, that isn't really a vaccine, it's just a shot, or losing their jobs. We also need lawyers going after the government, the military government, the feds, who forced military members into getting these shots or having to exit the military. Because the idea of forcing experimental shots into Americans' arms and children as young as 6 months old should never again happen in America. And this is what our court system is for. This is what lawyers should be doing right now.
Cheryl, great stuff to think about. Our guest, Cheryl Chumley, she's the author of a number of books, Lockdown, Socialists Don't Sleep. We've got to pull away, but I want to thank you for being on the program, but even more importantly, thank you for what you're doing to inspire and empower people in our nation. Thank you, Cheryl Chumley.
Thank you. Thank you for what you do as well.
Well, folks, this is the American Family Radio Network. Alex McFarland sitting in for Abe Hamilton III on the Hamilton Corner. And we're going to change gears. Cheryl mentioned our military and veterans, and we're going to talk about that with our next guest as well, Eden Gordon Hill. She's a broadcaster and an author and a person that I respect in so many ways, and she's with us now. She's also a military wife. Her husband is a veteran who served our country honorably, and we're going to talk a little bit about the state of our veterans. But Eden Gordon Hill, welcome to the American Family Radio Network.
Hi, Alex. Thank you so much for having me back to the American Family Radio Network. It's so great to be here on the Hamilton Show, Hamilton Corner. And I'm so glad to be able to be here and advocate for our veterans and our military families. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Well, thank you for all you do. And, just before I brought you on, I was thinking about is it the Great American Book Club, the broadcast that you do that you graciously had me on, the Great American Book Club, is that it?
It's actually the All-American Book Club.
The All-American, I'm sorry.
Yes, whenever you think of home of the 82nd, the All-American at Fort Bragg, it's the All-American Book Club, and I absolutely love that. They named the show on WMAL 105.9 after the location in which my husband served. So, yes, it's very neat, the overlap there.
Well, you're going to appreciate this little bit of serendipity and trivia, if you'll indulge me. Pope Air Force Base, down there in Fayetteville, part of Fort Bragg, now called Fort Liberty, but we North Carolinians still call it Fort Bragg. But the 82nd Airborne, there's a road called the Manchester Road. 200 years ago, that was my family's farm. The McFarlands migrated over here from Scotland around 1800, and they had about 200 acres of farm there, which is now Pope Air Force Base. So when you say the 82nd Airborne, that kind of stirs my patriotic little heart, Eden. So anyway, I appreciate you referencing that.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. My husband shares many stories about Pope with me as he was transitioning to head over to Iraq and serve in Operation Iraqi Freedom. But As we talk today, some of the things that I have been in the trenches fighting and advocating for our veterans, both at a personal and also a professional level. And Alex, I wanted to share with your audience that earlier this week here in Eastern North Carolina, I sat in one of our veteran centers for 5.5 hours waiting to sit down with a veteran services officer. And I took the opportunity, was sitting in there for that long period of time. It's almost like now waiting in a third world country emergency room with that time allotment. But at the end of the day, I took the opportunity to sit in there and talk with our veterans from Iraq, Afghanistan, the Gulf time period, and also our Vietnam veterans. Some in there with many, many disabilities, others in there with oxygen tanks, waiting to be seen. And, as I was hearing your interview with my friend from the Washington Times, Cheryl Chumley, I heard you ask her about a call to action. And I wanted to share with you, in the time that we have, that I want to give a call to action to our presidential candidates. I don't care what side of the aisle they sit on, independent, Republican, Democrat. I challenge and will give a challenge to each and every one of them to first tell me where their local veteran center is located. And second, would they consider going in there and sitting in there for 8 hours with those veterans who are waiting to get help and aid for their care? I wonder how many presidential candidates would stand up and say, I've done that, or I am willing to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Wow. Because you know what? I was just reading, Eden, as we were preparing for this. All branches of the military are having recruitment struggles. And could it be that part of the struggles to, arrest the attention and the buy-in of young people in all branches of the military? I mean, if they do much study at all, they realize that once they transition out and instead of active duty, they become veterans, our government, by and large, doesn't give them the best attention and care. And that's part of the recruitment struggle. Would you agree?
That is a major part of the recruitment struggle. I will definitely agree with that, because that transition from active duty to more of whether they go into another field or if they retire, there is this huge gap in the in-between that I have seen. And my husband has been retired for 20 years now, almost as long as he was in. And he is still trying to bridge that gap. If it wasn't for my career and the people I have served under President Trump and other members of Congress, he would probably still be years behind with getting assistance. Because, and here's why I'm saying that, it was just reported on November the 30th of this year on stripes.com, there are 72,000 hearings for veteran claims now pending before the Board of Veterans Appeals, which a federal watchdog agency told House lawmakers on Wednesday. 72,000 hearings for veteran claims. That is some of the largest numbers that they've ever had. And going back to the fact that I get to advocate for my husband, but I also want to advocate for our veterans, I also want to advocate for the next generation to say, I still believe in this country and I still want to fight for this country. I have friends who are serving in the Marine Corps, in the Coast Guard, in the Army, and they've all served for a long period of time, and now they're all saying, do we wait for our retirement or are we going to get out? Because they are pushing such a woke agenda that is not even close to becoming patriotism. And then you have a makeshift commander-in-chief who sends you in, and you have the example of Afghanistan. Deaths that should not have happened.
Hold that thought. Eden Gordon Hill of the All-American Book Club. We've got a break. We're going to come back and talk more after this.
Whether it's a story about prayer in public schools or battles for biblical truth within our denominations, the American Family News Network is here to tell you what the newsmakers are saying.
We are starting to see a rebellion against corporate America's endorsement, coddling of the LGBTQ agenda.
The American Family News Network is comprised of news anchors and editors that team up to bring you news from a Christian perspective.
A TRO for non-legal types out there is basically just an emergency order that would have allowed Liam to go back to school wearing the t-shirt he wants to wear. And again, that t-shirt says there are two genders.
Not only can you listen to reports on the radio, but you can also visit afn.net for coverage of the latest headlines.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, out on the campaign trail, was ready with an answer on the meaning of the word woke.
American Family News, reporters you can trust.
Little did you know that the same legal terminology, the same legal terms that we use today, probable cause, just cause, there's multiple ways to describe it, but David uses that same terminology. How do we know what's just? Well, we know what's just by looking at God's Word. That's where we get our ultimate definition of justice from.
AFA at the Core with Walker Wildman. Weekday afternoons at 1 Central on American Family Radio.
My wife, Jan, played in the marching band in high school and then in college. They all had matching uniforms. But when they played the music, nobody played exactly the same thing. As believers, unity of the faith, we're not the same. We're different. We have different parts to play. But there can be unity as we play our part in Christ Jesus.
Exploring the Word, weekday afternoons at 3 Central on American Family Radio.
The Hamilton Quarter podcast and one-minute commentaries are available at afr.net. Back to the Hamilton Quarter on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the program. Alex McFarland here. And let me say, before we resume our conversation with Eden Gordon-Hill, on behalf of everyone at the American Family Radio Network, I want to wish you Merry Christmas. I hope this month is shaping up to be very special. And, you know, a couple of weeks ago was the birthday of one of my heroes, a person I've studied in depth, and that was Winston Churchill. And Churchill said Christmas was a time to remember and a time to reflect. And I think about that, not only as a Christian, I'm a believer, I'm a Christian, and Christmas is so much to reflect and think about Jesus and the birth in the Bethlehem manger. I think that's why so much of our most beloved music and literature and art revolves around Christian themes. But I also reflect about our country and just the birth of this nation and the winter at Valley Forge and Washington and crossing the Delaware and crossing the Hudson River and in the cold of winter. Even Benjamin Franklin, who was like 74 years old, the oldest participant in the American Revolution, the oldest person at the Constitutional Convention. But Benjamin Franklin, through the snow in the winter, went up to Canada to try to solicit the help of Canada. And at least one person, 20 years younger, died due to the severity of the elements. I guess I'm reflecting about the incredible price that was paid to give us this free nation, and it's ours to preserve. And I think about the price paid by our veterans who so graciously put themselves in harm's way for freedom around the world and even serving other people of other nations. And of course, we know so many pay the ultimate price, gave their life. I truly believe that puts some obligation and responsibility in each one of our hands, that others did what they could do and were called to do. We must do what we can do for God and for country. Well, one person that is doing just that is Eden Gordon-Hill. She's an author, broadcaster, cultural commentator. Eden, thanks for being with us. Before that commercial break, I had to sort of cut you off there, but for all you do, your love for the Lord and your love for the United States and your zeal to participate in the preservation of liberty, it's very inspiring, and I commend you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I mean, Alex, I'm going to be honest with you. Veterans Day for me and veterans, it's 365. It is here, living here in eastern North Carolina, being surrounded by Fort Bragg, being surrounded by Camp Lejeune, being surrounded by Cherry Point and Seymour Johnson and New River and Pope. all of these amazing bases, which are housing our active duty, their families, and the future of our nation. And it is 365 for me to advocate for their livelihoods, because who else is going to do it? I had the opportunity to have a very powerful interview earlier this morning with a former congresswoman, and we talked about how we as Christians need to fight and stay in the public square. We need to be running for office, local, state, federal. We need to have that conversation of what this country was founded on, the Judeo-Christian faith, the principles of how this country came to be. We need to go back to the common sense solution, sitting around the kitchen table, or taking a veteran out and going to the McDonald's and talking with them and re-engaging, getting off of our phones, re-engaging and having these powerful conversations that would and can impact our nation's backyard. So as I am fighting for our veterans, sitting down with them, actually listening to them, how many members of Congress can you say will do that or has done that? It's hard for me to find them. And if there are presidential candidates who would consider, I challenge them to have a veteran town hall. And you know what? You don't have to do too much planning into it, because all you do is go into a veteran center when they have walk-in days, and you will have your town hall right there. These veterans need to be heard. These veterans don't realize what kind of care they could have, but that care has been taken away from them, and the bureaucratic tape of the federal government is getting in the way of helping our veterans. I don't want to generalize it. There are so many different aspects to it, but even just this week, a 94 Army veteran, year-old veteran, was kicked out of New York City nursing home to make room for the migrants. What kind of message is that sending? It was cited in the New York Post this week. What kind of message is that sending to our veterans and to the young generation, saying, why would I want to fight for this country if that's how they're going to treat me? Similar to what they did in Vietnam. It's now 2023 going into 2024. And this veteran was kicked out, and what they're finding is the decisions of all of these nursing homes in New York are being turned into these migrant housing opportunities, if you will, and yet we still have veterans who are not getting their appeals taken care of. They are being denied care. I can say right here, I have been denied 3 times by the Veterans Administration for a certain packet as a veteran spouse. 3 times.
Really?
Yes. 87% of military veteran spouses are denied a certain program. It's called the Veteran Caregiver Program. I have a good friend in California who had to go private and had to hire a lawyer because they denied her husband, who was a Navy SEAL, retired, who had early onset dementia. And the VA turned their backs on him. That is one of many, many stories I have.
Wow. And you know, this is so unfortunate because the open borders and the migrant influx is another story. But the fact that illegals would get precedent over veterans, American citizens who fought for this country, it's a combination of heartbreak and anger that I feel when I hear that, Eden.
Yes, it is. And basically, from how I see it, the veteran neglect and the neglect that is happening to our military, our enemies are seeing this.
Oh, yeah.
And we're at our weakest points for something to happen. And that conversation isn't really happening with the candidates as we head into 2024. I see more backstabbing and character diminishing than I see real accurate conversations of what is going to happen in 2024.
Well, Eden,
that is
let
my
me just
biggest concern.
one of the topics that I'm not really hearing any of the candidates on either side of the aisle talk about is military preparedness.
Yes.
And my goodness, you look at Hamas and the Middle East, you look at China and their aggression, you look at Russia attacking the Ukraine. I mean, there are wars all around us. And I'm on the road speaking, and I talk to a lot of current and former people serving honorably, and they talk about morale being down. And so I think some candidates going into 24 need to talk about the fact that our military preparedness and therefore national security has been compromised.
Yes, absolutely. And I talk to military spouses all the time about this. They see it, they feel it, they know it. But why in the world do they have to get that information from the national media and they can't get it from their resource officers for whatever service that they are in? That is the scary question that I continue to hear and continue to ask. There was one thing I wanted to say. Go ahead.
Well, I want to encourage moms and dads by way of a call to action. Eden, whenever I'm out, because my dad was a decorated veteran and I grew up in a very patriotic household, but when I'm out and I'll see people, mostly men, but they'll have on one of these ball caps with their branch of service or some medals.
Yes.
I always, total strange, but I'll go up and I'll say, hey, thank you for serving our country. And 100% of the time, people say, oh, thank you, it's an honor. Or sometimes they even tear up emotionally. But moms and dads, and Eden, if you would comment on this, but show your children that an ethic of gratitude, that when you see a veteran out in public, that you say, hey, I see your hat there. Thank you for serving. Don't you think that's important?
Absolutely. And I also want to, I basically want to applaud the parents that I know that already do that. I have friends all over this country who have instilled that, whether they are veteran families, active duty, or have never served. And I have seen them instill that in their children. And I am so thankful that we still have families out there, that we still have leaders out there that are instilling those qualities in their children for the next generation. I have hope that we will see, we still have time here in our Esther moments. We still have time to be able to fight for this country and be in the public square and be able to fight and advocate for our Judeo-Christian principles, our freedoms, our patriotism, and what this country truly means. One thing I wanted to cite, Alex, as we are talking about this, one of my favorite articles that actually the New York Times cited of President Trump, my former boss, earlier in November, he set aside the day to celebrate those who defended the United States in uniform. He, quote, promised to honor veterans in part by assailing what he portrayed as America's greatest foe, the political left. He said, using incendiary and dehumanizing language to refer to his opponents, Mr. Trump vowed to, quote, root out what he called the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country. He went on to say, the threat from outside forces is far less sinister, dangerous, and grave than the threat from within. And that was him at a 2-hour Veterans Day address in Claremont, New Hampshire. And that captured my heart and my spirit because having served in that administration, he gave first-class hotel, top-of-the-line care to our veterans, which they are now not being able to receive because they are waiting on appeals and claims of appeals, and they keep waiting, and then they get sent back, and then they have to wait again. No veteran should have to wait 5, 6, 7 hours in a veteran services office or have to wait 3, 4 months out of the year to get in to see somebody to then have it denied. This process is a tangled web that has no clear outlook for these veterans with their health care, with their mental, their invisible, their PTS, their TBI, all of their aspects of what they have gone through for war. We owe them at least the opportunity to sit down and talk with them and get things cleared for them and get all of these file claims out of the system so they can be taken care of. We at least owe them that. We at least owe them top quality care.
What would be, in the final moments we've got, Eden, what would be a call to action for citizens, for veterans themselves, and just for voters? Because 2024, pivotal. We always say things like this, but no kidding, folks. It truly is a no turning back moment, like you said, an Esther moment. What is your call to action, Eden?
My call to action is to any veteran who is tuning in, please don't give up. Please don't stop fighting. Call your member of Congress, call your local officials, call your mayors, call your state officials, call your general assemblies, call both senators of your state. Don't give up and say, oh, my paper is just going to be thrown to the side. Go, if you can physically go in with your spouse, with your child, go into a veteran services office, go into the VA, get in front of them. That is the only way you are going to get anything accomplished. Don't stop fighting. That is my call to action. As I entertained, if you will, all of these different veterans from A to Z the other day, we had strategic conversations about what is going to happen and the things that they needed to do. Don't give up and get involved in the process, get involved in the campaigns, get involved and speak your voice, advocate for yourself. You're the only one in your families that will do so. Don't leave it up to the government to advocate for you because they're not going to. And my final call to action is for any member of Congress, any local official, anyone who is running for the next president of the United States, get yourself over to a veteran services office in your state that you are running from. Sit down and spend 8 hours there, and I guarantee your life and your campaign will be changed forever.
We're almost out of time. Eden Gordon Hill, thank you so much. And listeners, thanks for being a part of the show today. May God bless you all.